I never imagined I would step into a courtroom for anything other than cleaning it. Yet there I was, standing before the judge, except this time, I wasn't holding a mop. I was holding a case. My name is Elena Carter. I'm 24 years old, and for the past 3 years I've worked as a janitor at the very courthouse where my case was now being heard. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. Every morning before dawn, I scrubbed floors, emptied trash cans, and wiped down desks. I knew every inch of this building better than most of the people who worked here. But none of that mattered to Judge Richard Holloway. He sat at his bench, towering above me, his gray hair neatly combed back, his robe pristine. His expression shifted from mild interest to outright amusement as he flipped through the case file. Then he chuckled, right there in front of the entire courtroom. "You're telling me," he said, leaning back in his chair, "that you, a janitor, are bringing a lawsuit against me? That's what this is?" Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The attorneys sitting nearby smirked. Even the bailiff, someone I greeted every morning while cleaning, struggled to suppress a grin. I felt my face burn, but I didn't waver. I clenched my hands at my sides, reminding myself why I was here. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied firmly, meeting his gaze. His smile widened. "And you're representing yourself?" "Yes." More laughter. Someone whispered something under their breath, and I heard the word ridiculous. Judge Holloway shook his head. "Miss Carter, do you even understand how the law works?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I understand enough, Your Honor." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. "Let's save everyone some time. I'll give you one chance to withdraw this nonsense before we proceed." I could feel every set of eyes on me, waiting for me to back down, but I wouldn't. I took a deep breath and lifted my chin. "No, Your Honor, I won't withdraw." For the first time his smile faltered. This was far from over. The smirk on Judge Holloway's face faded as he realized I wasn't backing down. He sighed, flipping through the papers in front of him. "Fine," he said, shaking his head. "Let's proceed then. Miss Carter, state your case." I tightened my grip on the folder in my hands. My heart pounded, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "Your Honor, I am suing you for wrongful termination and workplace discrimination." A hush fell over the courtroom. The smirks disappeared. The laughter stopped. Judge Holloway's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" I swallowed hard. 3 months ago, you had me fired from my job here at the courthouse. You claimed my work was unsatisfactory, but that wasn't the truth." His eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting I lied?" I held his gaze. "I'm suggesting you got rid of me because I refused to stay quiet about something I witnessed." Murmurs spread across the courtroom. I could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just some silly case anymore. The judge scoffed, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Hesitation, maybe even fear. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Carter." I nodded. "And I have evidence to prove it." Judge Holloway's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Evidence?" I pulled out a small USB drive from my folder and held it up for the courtroom to see. "Yes, Your Honor, I have recordings." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, people leaning forward in their seats. Even the bailiff's expression changed from amusement to shock. Judge Holloway's face went pale. For the first time, the power in the room shifted. And I wasn't the one who looked ridiculous anymore. Judge Holloway's hands clenched as he stared at the USB drive in my hand. His face, which had been filled with arrogance just moments ago, now held something else: worry. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Miss Carter, what exactly do you claim this recording contains?" I took a deep breath. Proof that I was fired not because of my job performance, but because I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. The courtroom was dead silent now. Even the people who had laughed earlier were paying close attention. Judge Holloway scoffed. "That's a bold statement, and what, pray tell, did you overhear?" I stepped forward, holding my head high. "A conversation between you and a defense attorney. A conversation where you assured him that his client, a wealthy businessman accused of fraud, would walk free. Not because he was innocent, but because he had, let's say, generously contributed to your re-election fund." Gasps filled the courtroom. Someone in the audience even muttered, "No way." Judge Holloway's face turned a deep shade of red. "That's absurd. This is slander." I didn't flinch. "It's the truth." I held up the USB drive. "And this proves it." He laughed, but it sounded forced. You expect the court to believe that a janitor, someone who scrubs floors and empties trash cans, just happened to stumble upon this so-called evidence? I nodded. That's exactly what happened. You see, Your Honor, janitors are invisible to people like you. You never notice us when we're cleaning your office late at night, when we're taking out the trash, when we're wiping down desks after you leave your meetings. His eyes darkened. You never thought twice about me being there, I continued. Which is why you didn't bother lowering your voice when you promised that attorney a favorable outcome, in exchange for a little something extra in your pocket. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously. Judge Holloway's confidence was cracking. Enough of this nonsense, he barked. That so-called recording could be anything. It could be fabricated. It could be... I have the original security footage, I interrupted. From the courthouse cameras. Silence. His mouth fell slightly open, but no words came out. Now he understood. I wasn't just some janitor. I was the person who was about to bring him down. Judge Holloway's breathing grew uneven, his once confident demeanor slipping with every second that passed. His fingers tapped restlessly against his desk, and for the first time since this trial began, he looked truly shaken. You claim to have security footage, he said, forcing a chuckle, though his voice was strained. That's a serious claim, Miss Carter. Do you have any idea what you're implying? I nodded. I know exactly what I'm implying, Your Honor. He scoffed, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. And where, pray tell, did you get this so-called footage? I turned slightly and pointed toward the gallery. From someone who still believes in justice. All heads turned as an older man in a security uniform rose from his seat. It was Daniel, a senior courthouse security officer. One of the few people who had always treated me with kindness. He stepped forward, his face stern. I reviewed the footage myself, Daniel said, holding up a thick folder. And I made copies before it could conveniently disappear. The courtroom exploded. Reporters scrambled to take notes, lawyers murmured in hushed tones, and even the bailiff's face paled. Judge Holloway slammed his gavel down, his voice shaking. Order, order in the court, but there was no order anymore. The power had shifted. I watched as the judge's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. He turned to the clerk. This case is a joke. I move to dismiss it immediately. You don't have the authority to do that, Your Honor. A new voice rang through the courtroom. Firm, authoritative. Everyone turned toward the entrance. And there, standing in the doorway, was a woman in a crisp navy blue suit, Margaret Holloway, the head of the Judicial Ethics Committee, and Judge Holloway's estranged sister, his face drained of color, her sharp gaze cut through him like a blade. We received an anonymous tip about this case. I decided to come see for myself. She gestured to Daniel, who handed her the folder, and from the looks of it, I arrived just in time. Judge Holloway looked like a man trapped in quicksand, sinking fast. This is absurd, you can't just... Oh, but I can. She flipped through the papers before looking up. Judge Richard Holloway, effective immediately. You are placed under investigation for judicial misconduct and bribery. Gasps filled the room. I held my breath, watching as the realization hit him. This was happening. The judge who mocked me, the man who had me fired because he thought I was beneath him, was finally facing justice. And I, Elena Carter, the janitor, was the one who brought him down. Judge Holloway's face twisted in shock, his grip tightening on the edge of his desk. Margaret, you can't do this. You have no right. I have every right, she interrupted coldly. And as of this moment, this case is no longer under your jurisdiction. Two uniformed officers stepped forward. The room fell into stunned silence. The once powerful judge, the man who had laughed at me, was now a defendant himself. This is a mistake, Holloway muttered, shaking his head. He looked around frantically, but no one stepped in to help him. The same attorneys who had smirked earlier now avoided his gaze. The bailiff, who once held back laughter at my expense, stood frozen. Daniel cleared his throat and turned to Margaret. I have the footage ready to be submitted as evidence. She nodded. We'll be reviewing it immediately. Then she turned back to me. Miss Carter, I'd like to formally apologize for what you've been through. You never should have been fired for doing the right thing. I swallowed the lump in my throat. After months of feeling powerless, of being treated like I didn't matter, I was finally being heard. Judge Holloway scoffed bitterly. You think you've won, don't you? His eyes locked onto me with resentment. You're just a janitor. What happens next? You think they'll let you walk away a hero? The system doesn't work like that. I held his gaze, feeling no fear. You're right, I am a janitor, I said, standing tall. And that's exactly why I won. You underestimated me. You thought I was invisible. But the thing about people like me, we see everything. The officers stepped forward, their presence undeniable, their hands hovering just close enough to show there was no room for argument. The authority Judge Holloway once wielded so effortlessly, now belonged to them. Judge Holloway, one of them said, his voice firm but professional. You need to come with us. For a long moment, Holloway didn't move. His fingers gripped the edge of the bench as if clinging to the last shred of control he had left. His face, once so full of arrogance and confidence, was now drained of color, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. He had spent years commanding this space, ruling over people's fates with a simple slam of his gavel. But now, that same courtroom, the one where he mocked me, where he had once laughed at my case, had turned against him. Slowly, his shoulders sagged, the weight of his downfall settling upon him like an unbearable burden. There was no escape, no one rushing to his defense, no one looking at him with admiration or respect anymore. The officers each took hold of his arms, guiding him away from the judge's bench, his throne. The very spot where he had passed judgment on others was now the place where his own fate had been sealed. As they led him toward the exit, his footsteps dragging against the polished floor, I let out a slow, shaky breath. It was over. The man who thought he was untouchable had finally been held accountable. And justice had been served, not by a lawyer in a crisp suit, not by another judge in an expensive robe, but by someone he had dismissed as nothing more than a cleaning lady. Margaret stepped toward me, her gaze steady, assessing. There was no trace of condescension, no hint of pity, just quiet respect. She studied me for a moment before speaking, her voice calm yet firm. You have a sharp mind, Miss Carter, she said, tilting her head slightly. Ever considered a career in law? I blinked, caught completely off guard. What? The word escaped before I could stop it. She smiled, not the kind meant to be polite, but a genuine one, as if she saw something in me that I had yet to see in myself. I've seen people with less determination make it, she continued. You fought your own case, stood up against power, and exposed corruption. That takes guts, not just intelligence, but courage. I could only stare at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. Courage? Determination? People didn't say things like that to someone like me. I was a janitor, a nobody in the eyes of this courtroom just hours ago, and yet here she was, offering me something I never thought possible. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek business card, then extended it toward me. If you ever want to explore something beyond janitorial work, she said, her tone encouraging, give me a call. I hesitated before taking the card, feeling its smooth edges between my fingers. The weight of it was heavier than it should have been, or maybe that was just the significance of what it meant. For years I had felt stuck, invisible, like my only purpose was cleaning up after everyone else. But now I was being given a chance at something more. I looked down at the card again. A new possibility. A door I never knew existed had just cracked open in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was moving forward, and no one would ever overlook me again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful and emotional content like this, don't forget to like this video to show your support. Comment below and let us know your thoughts. What would you have done in this situation? Share this story with your friends and family, because everyone loves a good twist. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. Your support means everything, and we can't wait to bring you more amazing content.